The Giants.
Good day to you, my friends. It is me, DM Dungeon Mastery, and today I would just like to give a little update on my giant stat blocks. They've been kind of falling into a bit of a state of disrepair, if you will, because of my newer videos where the giants are much more cleanly worded and things of that nature. So I wanted to take some of my older giants, especially the hill giant, because he was falling behind of the other giants, and just kinda modernize the rulings and the wording on some of my older giant stat blocks. So I'm going to go through each of my giant stat blocks here today and just show you the little changes that I made, if I did make any, and then just kind of give examples of where I updated the text and made things more clear rulings wise. So we'll start off at the bottom of the ordning with the hill giant. So looking at the hill giant here, this is the DM Dungeon Mastery official hill giant. Not too many things have changed. I did increase the speed. That's the biggest change so far. So the hill giants finally have the 60-foot movement speed that the other bigger giants have, because they need it. They're giants. They should have a very large stride as they're walking. They should be moving at double the speed of a normal human, in my opinion. Let's move into the abilities. Okay, so if we move into the abilities here, nothing is different about Emotional Outburst, but Ordning of Gluttony is new, because I did kind of like what I did with the Cloud Giant in terms of like implementing their version of the Cloud Giant Society's version of the ordning. Every giant has their own ordning within the greater ordning of the giants. So hill giants, they have their ordning of gluttony essentially, which is, I'm sure you guessed it, it's all about eating. So this is sort of out of combat, or you could say that they eat a full meal if they swallow a character, if they eat them with chew. They get temporary hit points if they consume a full meal, and while these hit points last, the giant has advantage on strength checks and saving throws. That's gonna be that. We move into the actions next. So, in the actions, what has changed? I took out the ability for the hill giant to use Cleaving Swing with his multi-attack, because that was a little bit, it goes against the design philosophy of D&D in general to let a creature use a recharge ability in their multi-attack. Cleaving Swing is supposed to be them doing like a really clumsy, risky thing, and I didn't want them to be able to just kind of abuse it, because it makes them out DPS some of the larger giants if they manage to hit a bunch of creatures. So the second thing that changed is with the boulder. I just added the text about being dazed. So essentially when you get hit with the boulder, you become dazed, and that just means your movement speed is reduced by 5. So that's really all. I just wanted to add like a name to the reason that your movement speed is reduced so that players understand it easier. Let's see what else changed. Squash is different. I actually buffed Squash because I changed how the Cleaving Swing worked. So Squash can squash multiple creatures. If a bunch of melee characters or whoever is standing essentially in the 3x3 squares that the giant takes up, it can land prone on top of them, and when they get crushed, they take the damage from being crushed, but then also they are grappled, restrained, blinded, prone, and they have total cover against outside attacks and other effects, and they're suffocating. So their escape DC for that is 16 to crawl out from underneath the giant, or until the giant stands up. But if they succeed the save of the giant like throwing its body down, they get to move to an unoccupied space of their choice within 5 feet of the giant, avoiding the crushing force entirely. So that's essentially, you roleplay that as like the giant runs up and he's about to just throw his entire body into slamming down on them, and they get to move, they like sprint out of the way as it's happening, because it's almost happening in like slow motion, because you know humongous creatures always move in like slow motion if you see in movies and stuff. So that's what changed for Squash into Snatch now. I just essentially now state that the giant can't swing its two-handed weapon until the grapple ends, but two-handed weapons can still be held in the opposite hand, however, so they don't have to put the weapon away. It's just reminding new players how that works. It was actually a little bit confusing for me when I looked at the like two-handed weapon rules for a while, because I thought you had to hold them with two hands at all times. Well, no, it's just whenever you swing it, you have to hold it with two hands. So you can't attack with it unless you have two hands on the weapon. I think that is gonna be it for those. And if we move into bonus actions, I changed the wording on Crush, Smash, Fling, and Chew. I replaced all the things that say Snatched with Grappled, so it's more in line with actual D&D 5e wording, and it makes sense and it's not confusing. Everything else is pretty much the same. They don't have... Chew is supposed to be like the Hill Giant's big ability when they pick you up. Everything else is pretty much the same. So yeah, that's gonna conclude the changes of my Hill Giant. Remember, I'm comparing my Hill Giant to my older version of the Hill Giant, not the original 2014 one. So going forward, keep that in mind, that when I'm comparing, and I like compare this giant to my other one, I'm talking about the first version of the giant that I made. Also, you'll notice with the Hill Giant, I did take away the rip action from a while ago, so if you downloaded the stat block with rip in it, you might want to update it to this stat block now, because this is the most up-to-date version. I just wanted to give an update because everybody's been giving me really good reviews on the giants, so I want to make sure that they are in their proper state for play, and I want them to be balanced. So that's it for the Hill Giant. Let's move on to their larger, more cold cousins into the chilled Northlands, the Frost Giants.
Alright, I've warmed the heart of mighty Trim with this one, my friends.
Let's get into the Frost Giant. So, my Frost Giant rework is going to start off with the movement speed has been increased to 60 feet. That's the only thing in the stats area that I have changed. The next change comes in from Brutal Strength. I took a page out of the Cyclops' book with this one because I actually liked that theme. Essentially what I did was I went and I took the Slasher feat and I gave the Frost Giants part of the Slasher feat. So it says that they still deal the extra damage die, so that's from brute strength like the Bugbear has, but then also on a critical hit now, if they deal slashing damage, the target is grievously wounded until the start of the giant's next turn, and while they're grievously wounded this way, they have disadvantage on all attack rolls. So a lot different now. I did kind of want to add something to some of the bigger giant stat blocks, so when they hit you with their weapons, they do something more than just damage. Not too much more though, I obviously don't want to upset the balance of the game. Their huge Great Axe has the addition now that when they hit you with it once per turn, they can reduce your movement speed by 10 until the start of their next turn. So that's pretty scary. Frost Giants are pretty scary still. That made them arguably even scarier. I mean, most of the time players aren't gonna run away because they don't want to take attacks of opportunity, so it's not that big of a deal. We go to the next ability under actions with Avalanche Strike. Finally, I came up with a way to make Frost Giants consistently cause avalanches with an actual in-game mechanic. So this isn't going to work, obviously, if they're raiding somewhere and they're not in a snowy region, or well, you're really rarely going to see a frost giant in a non-cold region. But this essentially can cause an avalanche, but really what it's meant to be used for is the frost giant slams its axe into the ground, creating a shockwave in a 15-foot line that is 10 feet wide. Each creature that is large or smaller in that line must make a DC 18 Dex saving throw. On a failure, the creature takes 4d10 bludgeoning damage and is knocked prone, and then on a success they take half as much damage and they are not knocked prone, and that shockwave creates difficult terrain in the affected area. So they like slam their axe in the ground, it creates a giant fissure, it rumbles the earth, and I put in parentheses, or in italics at the very end, this strike can cause an avalanche when used on mountains. So there's your lore reason for how frost giants cause avalanches. And even with all of my efforts to update everything, I forgot to add the dazed condition word under Icy Boulder. So if you do download this stat block, remember to tell your players if they get hit by the boulder that they are dazed, so they know why their movement speed is reduced. The next thing in the actions that I changed was Frost Breath, but I didn't change anything mechanically about it. I just added what happens to the creature if they just remain frozen. So I put after 1 week, the creature succumbs to the extreme cold as its life force is slowly drained by the ice. The creature's physical form remains preserved in ice until it is thawed by fire or shattered by bludgeoning damage. But if you have cold resistance, you remain frozen for up to 2 weeks before succumbing to the effects of the ice. And then you would assume if you have cold immunity, then you just remain a frozen statue. But you can't really get turned into a frozen statue if you're immune to cold damage. So that's that. And then everything else with Snatch, Crush, Rip, Fling, Smash, the wording has been updated, so it's all been turned into the term grapple instead of snatched. So in the actual description of the abilities, it all just says grappled now. So it said the giant spikes a grappled target instead of the giant spikes a snatched target into the ground. So yeah, that is the Frost Giant changes. Let me know what you think about those. Pretty sure Frost Giants are like one of the most favored giants out of all the giants from what I hear. Most people really like Frost Giants. So we're going to move into the next giant up on the rung of the ordning with the Fire Giants. It's going to heat up in here, boys. So, old buddy here, Mr. Fire Giant, did not get too many changes. The only thing that was really changed were quality of life things. So his movement speed has been increased by 10 feet, but I still wanted him to be the slowest giant because they're wearing all that incredibly heavy armor. What else did I change on here? So I updated the Molten Boulder with its dazed description. Well, actually I have it as crippled, but it's supposed to say it is dazed, so as long as I have something there, I guess. Mostly everything else stayed the same other than the wording for Snatch. I changed the wording on Crush, Smash, and Fling, but Smash for the Fire Giant is going to be the first giant that is able to stun a creature whenever they use Smash on something, and then that will persist throughout the rest of the giants on the way to the top. Cyclopses have this also, so they're unique in that aspect. But yeah, so the Molten Boulder reduces your movement speed by 5 still. They have a new ability under their grappled actions. It's called Seared Restraint. So what it means is the Fire Giant forcefully presses the creature against its burning weapon. The creature takes 6d6 fire damage and is ignited. While ignited, the creature takes an additional 3d6 fire damage at the start of each of its turns until it or an ally uses an action to extinguish the flames. And then it says, the giant drops the grappled creature, or it drops the creature, ending the grapple. Pretty much just quality of life changes, because I don't think the fire giant really needed any changes. They're pretty much in a good spot. The only thing that needed changed was the movement speed, and they needed their own unique grapple action like the other giants have. So that will do it for our big fire giant friend here.
And last but not least, we have the opulent Cloud Giant.
Our Cloud Giant didn't get any mechanical changes. I will say that right now. The only thing that I did change was the wording on a couple abilities, and I ended up giving the Gem Flecked boulder an actual monetary value. So each boulder is worth a certain amount of money based on how many gemstones are in it, but obviously you'd have to mine those gemstones out, otherwise you're carrying a 1,000-pound boulder around with you everywhere, and that's just not viable, especially if they throw multiple of them. So how to figure out what each boulder is worth: you roll a d6 and you add 3, and they have that many 500 GP gemstones, and you can roll them randomly from the table in the Dungeon Master's Guide on page 134. Other than that, nothing has changed with my favorite giant, because that's when I started realizing I needed to update the other giants, so I just wanted to give that as a little bit of an update. So I will just have the entire stat block on screen scrolling down, and that will end up concluding this video. It looks like trolls are winning the poll currently for the next creature rework, so get ready for some big smelly trolls, because I'm going to start reworking them as soon as I finish this video. Thank you guys for watching. It has been DM Dungeon Mastery, and I will catch you all in the next one.